Hi there, it's Ralph. Today is a day that you finally learn the basics of 3D modeling with Blender. We are going to be building this scene from scratch, and by the end of the video you should be able to do modeling on your own, hopefully. I will teach you the basics of Blender and some very simple techniques to do some low poly modeling. Before we jump in, a disclaimer. Blender is a huge software, and 3D modeling is an art form of its own. If this is really your first time doing this, be patient. You will need regular practice to get good at making 3D models. And more importantly, you will have to keep learning new things all the time. The learning never stops. Today we are going to model a simple scene because, let's keep it real, if I would teach you step by step how to do a complex model, you will have the same model at the end of the video, but you will be stuck when reproducing something similar on your own. Let's keep it simple and learn to walk before we can learn to fly. Now, why Blender? Well, it's awesome, it's free, and it is doing everything you want it to do for 3D modeling, rigging, animation, and even VFX and more. If you outgrow Blender, this means that you're really damn good. Let's talk hardware for a minute. You don't need a fancy computer to run Blender, especially not as a beginner. However, you need a mouse. Like, seriously, get a mouse. This will make your life 1000% easier. So if you're on a laptop, go get a mouse. Even the cheapest one will do. Alright, let's move on. This is Blender, and this is a default cube. This cube is special because it is the most deleted object in the world. People start Blender and the first thing they do is delete it immediately. And soon you will be doing the same. Today, however, the default cube will stay with us. The main area is called the viewport. With your mouse, click on the scroll wheel for orbiting around. You can orient yourself using the grid and the 3D gizmo on the top right. If you hold Shift while holding the scroll wheel and move, you pan left, right, top and down. The classic zoom in and zoom out by scrolling. To select any object, just like any program, left click on that object. If you click in the void, it deselects. If you right click, you get a context menu. It can be useful in the beginning, but most of the time we are going to access those functions by other ways. Now, last thing for the controls. If you have a numeric pad, you can quickly switch the view to a specific axis, and this is really useful. You can also click on the axis on the top right corner. Or you can even hold Alt or Option on Mac and click and drag the scroll wheel in the direction that you want to rotate the view. After a few minutes, this will all feel natural. In the viewport, you have all kinds of tools on the left and menus at the top. We are going to use a few of them, and little by little you will know them all. On the right, there is the outline panel. It is like a hierarchy and lists all the objects in the scene. Just under that is a properties panel. Just next to the viewport, this is the most important panel. There are many tabs on the left and you can configure so many things. The panel updates based on which object you have selected. In the viewport, you can click on the N key and this will toggle this side view. There are some more tools that are also useful, and many times add-ons that you have installed will be available here. Hit the N key again to hide it. I will enable the screencast keys so you see on the bottom left exactly what I am doing. Alright, let's move on to the Move tool. You can select the Move tool on the left and a gizmo appears on the selected object. You can move in every direction or choose only one axis. While moving, you can cancel with the right mouse button. Let's undo with Ctrl or Command Z. Under this, you have the Rotate tool. Right click to cancel or Ctrl or Command Z. Under this again, there is a Scale tool. I will reset all and reselect the Select tool. You will be doing this all the time. Move, rotate, scale. And selecting those tools is slow. Lucky for you, Blender has tons of shortcuts and it's worth it to learn them all. You will be much faster and productive, and it's just more comfortable once you remember them. Let's start. G to grab and move. Right click to cancel. S to scale, R to rotate. When you use a tool, you can apply some restrictions like the axis to use. So if I hit S to scale and then X for X axis, I only scale on the X. S and Z to scale on the Z axis. G to move and Z to move only up and down. One thing that is also useful for beginners is to always show the Move gizmo on the selected object. To do that, click on this small icon on the top right and under Object Gizmo, tick Move. Now you have the Move gizmo visible when there is a selection. Next up, let's talk about the modes. Now we are in object mode. We can only interact with complete objects. With the default cube selected, on the top left, you see where it says Object Mode. If I click on this drop down, there are many other modes. The one we will learn about today is the Edit mode. I will not choose it now, there is a better way. With the Tab key, you can switch between Object and Edit mode. Now I am in Edit mode. I can select individual vertices, because on the top I am in Vertex Select mode. I can go into Edge Select mode and select edges. And then there is a Face mode for selecting faces. The shortcuts are very easy. It's 1 for Vertex Select, 2 for Edge Select, and 3 for Face Select. If you want to select everything, it's the A key. Tap the A key twice to deselect all or click in the void. To select multiple faces or edges or vertices, simply hold Shift and click. Shift and click again to deselect. Alright, those are the most basic tools that we need. We are now ready to go into modeling. I will always repeat every shortcut so you will be able to easily follow along. Alright, let's go into Edit mode. Shortcut Tab. A to select all. The cube is centered on the origin, but I would like to move it up. So G to grab, Z for Z axis, and I can type 1 for 1 unit or 1 meter and enter to confirm. Now we will scale it. The height is okay, we only want to scale the sides. So S to scale, then Shift Z to restrict on the Z axis, and we scale 3 units. While in any mode, you can type a number, hit backspace to delete numbers, and so on. On the top you see the value. I will switch to Edge mode with the hotkey 2. Now we will add some geometry so we can easily create the windows of our shop. We will be using the Loop Cut tool. Hit Ctrl Command and R and go near the place you want to add a loop, right there. And with the scroll wheel, we can increase the number of loops. We will do 4 cuts, and to confirm, we left click. Now let's be careful, because we can slide the new edges, but we don't want to do that. So we right click to cancel. Let's repeat the same on the other side. Ctrl or Command R, 4 loop cuts, left click to confirm, right click to cancel the movement. I will select the top and move the roof down a bit. You have multiple select tools as well. With the hotkey W, you can go through all the selection tools. I mostly keep the rectangle selection tool, but others have their use as well. Let's also do a loop cut with 2 loops horizontally, and after we keep them selected, and we can use the scale tool on the Z axis to increase the gap there. So S, Z, and then enter to confirm. Before we do the doors and windows, we will do the roof. I will select all the top faces and we will extrude more geometry. The shortcut is E. E to extrude and left click to confirm. With the same faces selected, we're going to do an inset operation. So I to inset, and this will create new geometry inside of the selected faces. Left click to confirm. Then E to extrude, and this time we extrude down. Now we want to create a little border. Let's select those side faces, and you can do it quickly by holding Ctrl or Command and select all the faces in between as well. Now we want to extrude again, but outward. We do that by holding Alt or Option and then E to extrude. A menu pops up and we choose Extrude Faces along normal. Whenever you use a tool or operator, you see the values and options at the top. There we see that we can toggle even thickness with S, and this makes the result look much better. Alright, next we can now do the windows, and here is an important lesson to remember for 3D models. Always be lazy. Do not model details that will not be visible on camera. From the camera angle that we want, we know that the back of the shop will not be seen, so we don't model anything there. No windows, nothing. I'll go into face mode, shortcut 3, and select those faces. And those 2 faces, nothing else. Now we will use the inset operation. There is an option called individual. We can toggle it by using the I key again. Now we insert each individual face. If you hold Shift, the increments are much smaller and it's easier to do small adjustments. Just like that. Then Alt E and extrude along normals. I to insert again and extrude inwards. There you go, simple, low poly windows. Now let's do the front door. Until now we have been working on one single connected mesh, but you can also have pieces that are not connected, and many times it's much easier to disconnect pieces from each other. We will do that with a door. Let's select those 2 faces and hit Shift D to duplicate. Right click to cancel the movement, and let's just move it a bit forward so we see it. Let's scale on the Y axis, S then Y, then E to extrude. From just selecting one face, we can use the shortcut L or Ctrl or Command L to select the linked faces only. This allows you to select the entire door quickly. Let's move it back against the wall, then we will insert individual faces and extrude in. Alright, next we will do the handle of the door. And it's time I show you Blender's 3D cursor. It's this gizmo icon at the center of the scene. You can use it for many operations. One of those operations is the creation of new objects. If I create a new object, it will be created at the location where the cursor is. We can change the location of the cursor by holding Shift and doing a right click. Let's position the cursor on the door where we want the handle to be. To create a new object, it's Shift A, and we can choose between a few primitives. Let's take a simple cube. It's too large, so we can scale it down. S to scale until it can be considered to be a door handle. Now, with a simple extrude, we can model a handle. Select the complete handle with the L key and move it to a good location. Sometimes it's a bit hard to see what is going on. At the top, you can go to the last menu and enable cavity to better see the edges and cavities. Next up, we could do the roof. From now on, I will be going a little bit faster whenever we reuse what we have seen. We're going to do a lot of extrudes, a few insets, and we will duplicate faces with Shift D and do an unreasonable amount of G to move and S to scale. Alright, those small vents are very basic. I will duplicate one face, scale it down, extrude up again, hit number 2 on the keyboard to go into edge mode and move one edge down a bit. Then L to select all the connected faces and Shift D to duplicate. Then X to restrict the movement on the X axis and move it some 1-2 units. Repeat one more time and that's it. On the other side of the roof, I will directly extrude once and select one face at the top and move it down. I'll put there a kind of an emergency door. Again, duplicate, scale and extrude. Duplicate, scale and extrude for a small doorknob and one more time for the emergency sign at the top. Now I want to put the same emergency door on the ground floor. So I will select one face of the door, one face of the doorknob, one face of the sign and hit Ctrl or Command L to select all linked faces of all selected objects. Shift D and we move it all the way to here. And there is a small problem. We screwed up the scale of things. This door is completely out of scale compared to the rest. Let's fix that. I will select each piece and rescale them until it looks well integrated into the scene. All I do is select the complete object and then scale and move. Once it's good, I will actually duplicate this door and place it on the roof because now I know it's a correct size. But first, I must delete the old door. Select a face from each object, Ctrl or Command L and hit the delete key or the X key and then choose delete vertices. Great, let's duplicate the new door and place it on the roof. We will now adapt the rest. That looks already much better. Next, we're going to do the front of the shop, starting with a simple marquise. In edit mode, let's select those 3 faces and duplicate with Shift D. Then we scale on the Z axis to make it smaller and we hit E to extrude. Shift D again, scale and extrude. Now we'll move it a bit down. We can use the move tool directly or hit G then Z to move. Let's extrude one more time and then we select the faces under and extrude one more time. It's too perfect, so let's make it a bit more uneven. I'll hit 2 on the keyboard to go into edge mode and select that edge and move it down a bit with G and Z. I can also do it in vertex mode, it's very easy. On the top, I will add a few edge loops with Ctrl or Command R. Then I will select those faces and move them down a bit. Now it looks a little bit more like fabric. I will select one face of each object and hit Ctrl or Command L to select the linked faces. Then I move all down a little bit, just like that. Alright, for the sign we start in a similar way. Select a few faces and Shift D to duplicate. Move it up and scale it on the Z and Y axis to be the shape of a sign. Then E to extrude. Alright, looks good. I will switch to edge mode and select all the edges around. It's called a ring selection and you can do it quickly by holding Alt or Option and select this edge to do a ring selection. Now they are all selected. You can also go into the menu on the top and there are many ways to quickly do all kinds of selection. Next we want to round the corners. We do this with a bevel. Let's hit Ctrl or Command B to start a bevel. With the mouse wheel, we can increase or decrease the number of segments. Alright, now it's very low poly. And if I disable the cavity in the viewport, we see that each polygon on this round area is visible. We can smooth it out. And to do that, I will show you Blender's search operator. If you hit F3, you have this search opening up and this allows you to find a lot of Blender operations. I've personally remapped F3 to space because that's easier for me on my laptop. Now search for smooth and choose Object, Shade, Smooth. Now everything became worse. But don't worry, smoothing works by flattening the angles between adjacent faces without changing or adding geometry. It's purely visual and adds an organic look. But smoothing on angles bigger than 45 degrees often looks strange. And here we have many 90 degrees angles, so it's kind of a disaster. We can fix this easily by going into the Properties panel, then select the tab Object Data Properties, it's a green triangle. There, under Normals, we can enable Auto Smooth. 30 degrees is a default, and you can play with the value to very quickly improve the look of your model. Alright, after that we will add the text on the sign. And no, we are not going to model individual letters, we will take the efficient path. Tab to go back into object mode. With Shift right click, I will position the 3D cursor on the sign. Then Shift A to open the menu and choose text. This will create a text object where the 3D cursor is. Let's rotate on Z by 90 degrees. Just do R to rotate, Z for Z axis, and type 90 and then hit enter. And then I rotate 90 degrees on the Y axis. Let's move the camera to orthographic view so we can position and scale the text to fit our sign. After that, to edit the text, it's very simple. Hit tab on the keyboard and type your text. I will just write the shop. The text is flat and we want to extrude it a bit. We can go into Object Data Property tab, it's always a green tab, and there under Geometry we can increase the extrude value. Great! Our shop is levitating, which is not very realistic, so let's add some ground and finish up the scenery. Shift A, Mesh, and choose Plane. The plane is on the 3D cursor, which is not really what we wanted to do, so Ctrl or Command Z to undo and we will reset the 3D cursor. Hit Shift S to open a new menu, and there you can reposition the 3D cursor in a number of ways. Let's choose Cursor to World Origin. And we redo the last step. Shift A, Mesh, Plane. Go into Edit mode, select everything, and then S to scale, and then type the value 10 and enter. Alright, let's add some loop cuts with Shift R. We increase the number to 2 and left click to confirm, and then S to scale, restrict on the X axis and type 1.3 and enter. Repeat for the Y axis. The middle face will be our sidewalk. In face mode, select it and extrude a little. Select all with A and move this object down a bit. Great. In the outliner we can rename objects by double clicking on it, and that's great for keeping things organized. Alright, next up let's add a fence around the shop. We will keep it simple and I'm going to show you how to work with modifiers. First, in object mode, I'll put the 3D cursor right there on the sidewalk and create a new cube. Go into edit mode and scale it down and make it quite thin. Something like that. With everything selected, Shift D to duplicate, and let's move it and scale it to have the long part of the fence. By now, I hope you are more comfortable scaling and moving things around. This is our fence. Great, isn't it? Now we use an array modifier to repeat this object. With the fence selected, go into the modifier tab, add modifier and choose array. We want to repeat this in the other direction, so we can change the factor to -1. Then we increase the count until we reach the end of the sidewalk. It's okay if it's not 100% precise. We can go into edit mode and select this face only and move it along the x-axis. We still see the array modifier doing its work, and just like that we can make sure it's at the right size. Great. Let's be lazy and duplicate the entire fence 2 more times to cover the rest. Alright, a shop wouldn't be a shop without customers. And customers would come by car. Let's model a car, yeah! And right away we are going to calm down. We won't be making a real car in a beginner tutorial. Instead, we will use a subdivision surface modifier to make a very simple shape of a car. So I'll put the 3D cursor in front of the shop and add a cube. Tab to go into edit mode and let's shape it. We always do the same here. We make the general shape, add a few loop cuts with Shift R, move some edges around until you have kind of a shape that you like. Now comes the interesting part. In the modifier tab, add modifier and choose subdivision surface. Let's increase the level to 2. What is awesome is that modifiers are non-destructive. The mesh is still this ugly cube. The modifier splits faces into smaller faces to make it smoother. Now in edit mode we can add a few more loop cuts or bevels to kind of sharpen some edges and corners. Like that, for example. I will scale this new loop cut on the Z axis and type 0 to straighten it. We also want to add a shade smooth. Alt click to do a loop selection, and you can bevel some edges with Ctrl or Command B. Alright, I will not go into too much details into subdivision surface modifiers for the moment. This is also called high poly modeling or hard surface modeling, and there are a lot of techniques to learn to be able to make more and more complex shapes. By the way, you can also click on this icon to toggle the X-ray function. This is super useful to select faces that are hidden. Okay, let's keep it simple, and when you are done, just duplicate it next to it. Also, you can always toggle modifiers. Sometimes some modifiers are intensive to compute, and you only enable them during render time. Let's now do some trees. Those are going to be the most basic and perfectly trimmed trees in the universe of trees. Shift and right click to put the cursor there and add a new cube, tap to edit and scale it down. On the keyboard, G to move, Z for the Z axis and move it up. Duplicate with Shift D, Z on the keyboard to move it up and scale it to have something like that. Now in Edge mode, with only the top object selected, hit Ctrl or Command B to bevel everything. We can increase the number of segments with the scroll wheel and make it nice and round. Let's not forget to shade smooth, and we can also activate auto smooth. Great! Let's now go into top view and duplicate this tree a little bit everywhere. Once you have a few trees, you can randomly select a few and scale them up or down. On the top, you can change the transform pivot point to individual origins, so each tree scales based on its own origin. When you manipulate multiple elements, you should always consider the pivot points when scaling and rotating. You can hit the period on the keyboard to quickly change that settings as well. Alright, that's all for the modeling part. From here, you can continue extending the scene with what you have learned and just create and have fun. Blender is an amazing piece of software and there's so much possible. There's just too much for one video or even one channel. If you had fun and learned something, please consider subscribing and leaving a thumbs up. I thank you very much for watching, keep it up and see you next time.